what we do. The world needs this because
Yeah.
we other everyone. Our job as voice teachers and creatives is to create a space where everyone feels heard and
Yeah.
seen.
We're here today, and I have a guest, Jamie Wollrab, and welcome to my little podcast, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
Normally, I would do an introduction that I'd researched and written out. And today I made the decision that we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do an emergent conversation, almost like a first date podcast where we're getting to know each other, because I've been told by many people in some of our shared communities, you really need to talk to Jamie because we have similar interests and similar focus in the world and maybe similar backgrounds. So if you could help me out by giving your little introduction on how you would describe yourself.
Oh God, this is great. It's always evolving. Years and years of being an acting coach. And then I did 7 years with John. So I started working in men's leadership, and that merged into what I would call the creative mastery coach. So I work with creatives to help them become executives of their own lives. And I work with executives and entrepreneurs and helping them become more creative. I bring these people together and magic happens. So I have a production company and a coaching studio, and those two things merge. So I produce plays, I direct and I act, and I make films. I teach public speaking, and I lead men's leadership programs. So right now, I'm more of an artistic director of my own studio of conscious work and the highest level of creative freedom and expression.
If you started out, sounds like more on the creative side of things. What's the pathway been to merging the performance aspect and the creative sort of filmmaking side with embodiment, and then of course with the leadership piece? Which came first? How did they merge?
I'm going to give credit. I love my teachers. There's a woman named Nancy Mayans, incredible Linklater voice teacher, and I was at Rutgers, Mason Gross, doing my master's, and I had an opening in a voice exercise in like 1999 or 2000, and I had like a past life regression. It was one of the deepest things that I'd ever been through. And I realized that when I started being embodied and I started doing voice work and I started doing embodiment work, my art just went through the roof. And when I was just doing the technical acting, it just felt robotic. So I always ended up doing my best work when I was in movement class and I was in voice class. And then I ended up meeting Don Cartwright years later, got into the Tantra world by accident through my friend Julie Day. And all of a sudden, oh my God, I was like, there's really no difference between acting and embodiment. It's the same thing. And then I started working with John and assisting him for those years. So he'd be like, get up and do this shadow work. And I'm like, oh, I'm playing a character. So I need to run more energy through my body. And it's so they're so one and the same. I can't
Yes.
even tell the difference between the two anymore.
So many people who don't understand acting think that acting is putting on a character in a way that isn't you. And I personally think that acting is about expanding the range into who we are by stretching our range of what we have access to,
Mm-hmm.
which is how I experienced so much of polarity also, and the shadow work and the archetype work. Like, how do I extend out what I already have access to include more?
Mm-hmm. and that and that's how the patterns can get shifted, the neurological patterns and the physical patterns and the trauma that's in the body. It's like it's interesting. The more I'm in the archetype, the more freedom and permission I can give, the more myself I feel. It's
Exactly that.
interesting. Then I've been able to find certain characters. It's like, wow, I can play Achilles or I can play Hector. And these roles, they're like, it actually, you find that you can live a bigger and freer life by giving yourself permission to be that big. And then
Yeah. Okay.
ultimately in polarity, then the feminine is like, oh my God, then they feel so ravished. And this is something I have an issue with society right now, is that everyone's so like afraid to be or say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, that they're actually causing more harm by being closed and shut down.
Mhm.
So I think we're missing that embodiment piece where there's more acceptance when people give themselves more permission to be fully themselves. And I think
Yeah.
acting is a great gateway to do that.
Yeah, and I love that. And what I'm also hearing or what I'm relating to, especially when you're talking about doing, and we're totally geeking out here. So I'll try to do
I know.
some explanation for people, and that's okay. That's
I know, we're
okay.
nerds. We're nerds.
Some people will relate to it, and some people have no idea what we're talking about, and
I
we're just
know,
going to
I get
make
it.
that okay.
Sure.
But when you talk about the idea of exploring archetypes, what a beautiful way to deepen into a character, as you could see most characters, like the one you mentioned, as being one-dimensional. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, we know as actors that we want to bring all the layers in. So when we can practice that titration between the different aspects of ourselves and characters, wow, we just get those rich layers
Mm-hmm.
of beingness.
Oh, I love what you're saying. I love it. And then what happens is that we help heal the audience. So if we
Yes.
give ourselves permission to go big and to be fully expressed, then the audience goes, ah, they're so free. I can allow myself to be fully expressed. And so
Yeah.
there's a deep purpose in that. Like you give other people permission to feel.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful aspect of acting that is not often named,
Hmm.
the healing aspect of it. I think that's why people love to experience through mirror neurons other people's distress or pain or anger or fear. But to name it, I think is even more powerful when we, explicitly say, hey, this is part of the healing. It just gets so much richer. Curious to know how you interweave acting and speaking.
Okay, I'm about to geek out.
Go, let's
So
go.
that is
Let's go.
this. I love that. Okay. The biggest issue I see with actors and acting in itself is it's all premeditated, right? So whether you're taking something off the page, whether we're saying to be or not to be, that is the question. We know what we're going to say, right?
Yes. Okay, you
Right?
go. I
So
like this.
we already know what we're going to say. So what's so interesting about it's that, let's say this podcast that we're doing right now is it's improvisational, truly improvisational. There's no prompts. We've just met. You didn't research me. And so we're genuinely what is coming out as I'm speaking. If you see that my breath and my thought are connected, yeah? So if I'm thinking something, it's because I'm genuinely thinking of it in the moment, and my breath and my inhale
Mm,
connect. But when we start doing text, we forget that breath and thought are connected because we already know. So there's no thought. There's no thought with it. So now all of a sudden I'm saying lines.
yeah.
I'll give you an example of this. Can I show off for a second? Can I show
Yes.
off? Okay. So to be or not to be,
Yeah.
that is the question. Oh, I like in middle school or junior acting, as opposed to the codes that you're getting from this text,
Hmm.
is that you're saying it for the first time.
Yes.
Even if you've said it, one of my favorite teachers said, do it again, but for the first time. Do it again, but for the
Yes.
first time.
Yes. Yes.
So to be or not to be, as opposed to as I'm sitting there, it's like I forgot, I don't know the line, or I'm pulling that from that text, and I'm breathing.
Yeah.
To be or not to be. That is the question. And that's what's
Totally.
so great about the embodiment piece is that I'm breathing it so deeply in myself that the text that I've memorized is like literally in my cells. It's in all of the chakras. It's in me so that it comes out from the deepest part of me like I'm thinking it for the first time, even though it's been said billions of times for 500 years.
Yes.
So, and that's where in anything that is being read, whether it's a speech, whether it's text, it's Shakespeare, it's a poem, you want to now what I love about voice is it's one of the most intimate things that can be over Zoom or in person, that is inside my body, that is permeating through vibration, through this, that is affecting you and you are affecting me.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that it is truly intimate, that
Hmm.
through this vibration you are being touched by, from something that's inside of my body into your body and vice
Hmm.
versa. and it's a lost art, and we've moved into this visual art
Yeah.
through our phones and through technology. And so my passion is to get people back into their signature note, into their vibration again. And what better than through the sound or through that text? And I'm going to give as much of my fullness through these words off that page to you through that funnel of that character.
This idea of our voice being a reverberator and a connector, both to our own core and our own selves, as well as to another person who is perceiving or listening or nearby or in the vicinity, is again goes back to the polarity practices, and how when we are working with embodiment, something one of my acting teachers said, and that's always stuck with me after what, I don't know, 40 years, is your body can not deny the sound of its own voice.
Correct.
So when you breathe and sigh or express pleasure or deepen into both the breath, but then sound on the breath, which was
Mm-hmm.
something that this teacher, and his name was Alan Langdon, worked with us so much on. When you allow yourself to breathe and express from that breath in a way that your body can hear itself, you
Mm-hmm.
cannot help but drop into the experience of that. So the synergy of what you just illustrated and talked about of the breath combined with
Mm-hmm.
the sound of it drops us so
Mm-hmm.
deeply into the experience because the body can not deny its own sound.
Mm-hmm. I
You
love
know,
the feminine practice too. This is great. Where David and John always talk about like the feminine to use less words. Ugh, ugh. Like they're mad, like don't just stomp your feet or make a noise. Like we know what the feminine is meaning and saying and conveying, and you don't even need words. It's just the
mhm.
sound.
True.
Like,
And yet,
oh,
that this is absolutely true. And I personally feel really passionate about synergizing
correct.
more words with embodiments and polarity, because sometimes there's so much richness in that that sometimes we leave behind the power
Mm.
of language, the power of words, which, are always an incantation for our healing, you know,
But I
and
will
connection.
say is that so often I mean, we know this in communication is the words are 9% of the communication.
Yeah.
But if you aren't breathing and in the sound and truly, the words don't matter
Yeah.
unless they're doing what you're teaching, which is so noble. That is to mean fully the sound, and then to have the right, as Mark Twain said, the difference between the right word and the wrong word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. And to have that full sound in confinity with the right word, that changes the world.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, you said that beautifully. And this is so at the heart for me. It changes the world. It changes our connection. It changes our relationship with ourselves when we can bring those pieces together. When you were talking earlier about saying something again for the first time, I use this when I teach specifically pause. So I love that you just illustrated pause, breath, and discovery at the same time. When you can discover what's going to happen next or what you're going to say next and let your audience see that discovery, you're giving them the gift of yourself, you know. And so I tell that to people when working with them on speaking, is that if you use pause not as something where you're trying to create space, but a place where you're connecting with your breath, you know,
Mm,
with your audience and
mm,
the ethers of what's the next word,
mm.
and you let them watch you go through that process, then through mirror neurons, they land in it themselves.
I mean, you're speaking my language. You're really speaking my language. I mean, yes, it's just, affirmation, confirmation,
Yeah.
100%. What helps me, because as an artistic director and a director, not just the actor, is that I can do the thousand foot view of it.
Yeah.
And when I see masculine and feminine truly on stage or on camera, which is movement and stillness, just like a
Mhm.
neuron and electron, right?
Yep.
So let's say in a drama, one person's crying and everyone else is still. In a comedy, two people are crying. Two
Oh,
people are
I've
crying on
never,
stage.
okay,
It's
I've never thought of that.
hilarious.
Say that
Someone's like,
again. Say that again.
"Ah," and then the other person's like, "Ah," and they're both crying. It's hilarious. But if one person's crying, it's a drama.
Oh my God. Hold on. Just pause for a second there. I have never heard that before. I just need to let that land in me a little bit. That's really fascinating.
So we're out of polarity, right? We're out of
Yeah.
polarity. And so it's a comedy. So it's like two clowns, right? But if it's, everyone else is still and holding space and in the masculine, and then that character is having their emotion, it pulls focus to that place. So I have a really cool story to tell you. I was in this with this cohort of these incredible teachers from Steppenwolf and improv and viewpoints, and my friend Eric Honeycutt, Jeff Perry, and Alexander Billings. And Jeff Perry in Steppenwolf was, and created True West and a bunch of other. He's an incredible actor. And then my friend Eric is an improv actor. So when they were doing their improv show, they would want it to seem like it was a written script. So they were bringing things back. They were bringing back
Yeah. So it's,
masculine structure, but their intention was to somehow find a story as though when people
yeah.
watched it, it was like a structured play. And so if there was a bit, they would bring the bit back. And so they were trying to find the masculine in a chaotic form. All right. Then Jeff Perry said, that's crazy. He goes, when we would be working on plays with playwrights, we would want the scripted play to feel improvisational.
Yes. Okay.
So they were trying to bring more feminine to a masculine structure.
Yeah.
And then the improv people were trying to bring masculine to a feminine structure. So the dynamism between the two is what creates aesthetic arrest, where we go, oh, how did you bring structure to this chaos? And how did you make this play that I know a million times be like you're just coming up with it for the first time? And so that polarity creates this highest artistic like expression. And the
Yeah.
more that we can have the capacity and agility to be in the masculine and feminine at the same time, or know when I'm giving the stage to somebody and I'm upstaging, I'm like, here, the stage is yours, and I'm being generous with that, and then it's my turn to take the stage in the right moment. That's how we like direct to like true like inspiration. And that's why
Yes.
I love the masculine and feminine, because I know it in other terms. We
Yes.
call it something else.
Brilliant. That exactly, exactly. And just so much deeper and such a beautiful story. I love that. It's so true. These principles exist everywhere because they're just true principles. They're not ideas.
I'm going to say something. I want it to be a little racy here. Is
Okay.
that we're in a world artistically
Yeah.
where we want equality and we want representation, and all of that is beautiful. And one of my teachers says, I won't say who it is, but she was talking about like Sam Shepard or John Patrick Shanley, who writes kind of, can be seen as misogynistic, chauvinistic.
Yeah.
And she said, it was great. She said, it's politically incorrect, but biologically sound. So when, in Fool for Love, Eddie is being
Yeah.
still and he's like on the ground and he's being this way, it's sexy. And then May is being like, chaos, and da, 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 and you're seeing him still and her this, and she's super feminine and he's still. It's not as sexy when Eddie is the one moving around a lot.
Right.
When he's still, and this in dance, when you have on stage this character is still and this one is the one who's moving, and then at a certain point it can switch. There's just something in the relational physics that just our bodies go, that makes sense.
So in my dance, the leader, I dance West Coast Swings, my primary dance right now. And so the leader, this isn't 100% true, but if you were going to really simplify it, the leader stays in the center and the follower goes back and forth across the slot. And the leader moves the follower across the slot. And the leader's in charge of changing direction. The follower moves towards wherever the direction's been and brings life and energy and creativity and expressiveness to it. And the leader redirects.
Right.
And so, yes, that's just another example of that these patterns show up in all the ways
Mm.
that make sense to our bodies, that make sense to our biology. I love that quote.
Yeah, I'm just saying is that I think we're in a really interesting time. Certain people have a masculine essence and people have a feminine essence, and I can be really feminine, and somebody who's more feminine identified can be masculine. But I find that on stage and in art, I think that has to be a conscious choice. If there's too much feminine on stage or there's too much masculine, it's not as dynamic. We
Yeah.
want both.
Mhm.
We want
Or
structure.
moments of one and then the other one descends to
Correct.
switch up the
But
energy.
we
So
even say masculine and feminine in art sometimes. It's a very triggering thing. I have
I
to
would
use other words.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we can geek out and use masculine and feminine because we know what we're talking about, and some of the people who will be listening to this conversation will also be able to follow. But let's talk about the fact that the political and the biological reference that you just
Hmm.
made are sometimes really triggering in the collective right
Yeah,
now. And especially if you talk about
correct.
polarity, it's really intense how I personally think it's because people don't really they misunderstand what polarity
Right.
means, but we are having to kind of, as teachers of it and practitioners of it, use different language so that it's palatable, because underneath it the biological truth is there, the natural scientific relationship between various energies is there, so we have to use different language.
It's in physics. It's in science. There's consciousness, stillness, and then there's energy and movement. And then some people feel more at home in the energetic emotional movement, and other feel more at home in the stillness and in the emptiness and in the consciousness. And we have both,
Yeah.
but I think as an expression is being able to be fully embodied in one or the other, and be able to go between the polarities within ourselves.
Mhm.
And then I believe through those polarities within ourselves, we actually find out who we are.
And just to go back to your meta piece, in a way, this conversation is this too, because it is an improv,
Hmm.
like you said. I think you referenced that actually, that in a way it's got a bit of a structure because, you're there, I'm here, I have a podcast, we've been
Hmm.
introduced, we know we have certain things in common. There's a sort of consciousness of our commonality, and yet it's just completely improvised. So we have the
Yeah.
same metaphor that you just used around bringing structure to improv and bringing creativity and flow to a structured piece. So
Isn't that
yeah,
cool?
yeah, I love
And
all
you'll
things meta.
never get there. It will never be perfect.
Yeah.
The improvisational and the structure, it's like you seek that sublimation, you seek it. It's like, oh, I've seen in my life, whether it was like Barishnikov or it was
Mm.
Radiohead, or these very, very few moments, Mark Rylance, I can count on one hand how many times I've truly seen that fully embodied in
Mm.
one thing. And my passion is to seek that. And that just brings so much happiness and joy to me, is seeing like this kind of conversation of somebody who knows so much and has this wealth of knowledge and experience, and to be able to like meet in this liminal space and talk about this. I mean, what else is there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, 100%. It definitely juices me up. But that you just mentioned Barishnikov, and a couple other people. Then the description that you just gave about there have been moments where you felt that. To me, that what you're talking about there is mastery, and mastery requires the meeting and the synthesis and the magic of these opposite poles meeting each other. That's why people have all the structure. I guess that's why people talk about 10,000 hours and John talks about holding the pose and
Mm.
continue to practice, is because
Prince,
Prince, yeah. Well,
Prince.
Prince
Like,
does that on so
talk
many
about.
levels.
I know, right? I saw Prince at Coachella and I melted my face, where I'm like, I've never seen a more, maybe David Bowie, but I mean, Prince really had that, where this was like the most masculine, feminine being in one being.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I couldn't, like, the absolute flow and absolute like mastery of every little, like, totally masculine and then totally feminine at this. And he did a cover of Radiohead's Creep, and I was like, it
Prince
was
did
amazing.
Radiohead's Creep.
I'll send it to you. Oh my God. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And I was like, that
Yeah.
I'm spending the rest of my life trying to find my version of that, and
Oh my
I'll
gosh.
fail. Yeah, I'll fail,
Ugh,
but I will fail
but you'll choose
valiantly.
fun. Okay, I was just going to mention this, even though it could take us off on a whole other realm, and there's a couple
Sure.
other open
Yeah, yeah,
threads that I
yeah.
want to come back to if I can find them again. But, the whole world of non-binary in terms of
Hmm.
sexual identity and relationship is so big in the world right now. And I have a non-binary child, an
Mm,
adult non-binary kid. And so at the same time as I feel and hear and know the resistance to polarity in sort of the feminist world, in the
mm.
larger collective, it also, I've been really sensitive to, well, how does this land in a world where someone I love is non-binary, and like, how do you fit all this together? And I think you
Mm.
just gave a really great example. I think Prince is such a beautiful example of the fact that we misunderstand polarity by trying to specifically genderize it in a binary world.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Polarity and gender have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they can if you want to make it that way, but it's not about that.
I mean, they can have great impact in relationship and
Yeah.
sexuality in
It's
cis
like a Venn
het
diagram.
relationships.
They do
Yeah,
they can cross, but
yeah.
if they're crossed with integrity and consciousness and love and respect, then it's beautiful.
I think I might say it's not that they have nothing to do with each other, but they don't have to be the only way
Yes, you
through.
said that. You said that better. You said that better. They don't
Yeah,
have to do with each other.
yeah. They can enliven and enrich masculine feminine interaction that
Mm.
might be gendered.
Is it London and Justin? They just
Hmm.
changed the words. They used alpha and omega.
Right.
Are there times where you're the more, emotional and energetic one, or is there one where you're the one who's master of time and space?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's really great reason for doing that, and a lot of those substitute words, or maybe they're not even substitute, they're paralleled words, add a layer of richness and can be really, really useful. And I love masculine, feminine as words.
So,
It's like, that means something to me that's slightly different, you know?
and what I love about what you do, and what I try to do, is to be able to have a voice in a conversation to what things that would seem contradictory, or so you're into masculine feminine and your child is non-binary, and you would think that those two things are this, rather than let's have our voices and let's have a conversation, and I want to learn about you, I want to listen to you, and
Mm,
I have this, and it's like, okay, maybe in some ways. And I think that what we do, the world needs this, because
yeah.
we other everyone.
Yes.
And we can like the masculine and feminine, love the art and all of us, but our job as voice teachers and creatives is to create a space where everyone feels heard and
Yeah.
seen. And because I think we all ultimately are more alike than we think.
Hmm. Hmm.
But we're just in these echo chambers now. And I think voice teachers and people that teach communication and
Yes.
empathy is so essential, be in an authentic conversation, and look for the similarities instead of the differences.
Yeah, exactly. And this query did result in exactly this beautiful conversation with my kid who's,
Mm.
they're in their early 20s. And just this, and I just brought that to them. And I said, I'm really struggling with the fact that I feel so deeply in this polarity world. And I'm wondering if that feels like an affront to you, and my kid was the one that said, I don't see them as being, you know, un and maybe that's because the actual experience of being non-binary is the what you just said, the mastery of the integration of the synthesis. Maybe there, and maybe you can have polarity in two different
Victor
bodies.
Victoria. Remember
Victor
Victor
Victoria.
Victoria?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
have to imagine that you bring this into your directing. I think you said maybe use different words. So that's the first question. I'll do it in two parts. I'll throw you both at the same time. But the second one is, how do you use these principles in the business and executive presence and leadership world in ways that I'm going to guess you also have to shift up the languaging and the pathway in?
It's a really fun story. I got to direct one of my favorite plays I've ever directed. I worked on with some actors that were on a show called Outer Range for Amazon last year, two very good friends of mine, and they were filming, and I went down to Santa Fe and we directed this a steady rain while they were filming. And I had just come from leading a men's retreat in Colorado, so I drove down. So we spent months rehearsing over Zoom. I led the men's retreat. I drove down to Santa Fe and directed the play.
Wow.
And then the play was such a hit that we ended up opening it in LA, and it was an even a bigger hit at that time. And I hadn't directed in a while a full length play. And I realized that the reason why the men's retreat was a success is because I treated the men's retreat like I was producing a play. I went through the same level of producing and connecting and finding spaces. And then I went about the play the same way that I would lead a men's retreat. There was no difference.
Nice.
I'm producing an event.
An experience,
It is a creative
connection.
experience.
Yeah.
And I brought consciousness and my own personal practice and my own personal integrity and treating an intern the same way that I would treat the movie star. So I'm still me. I'm still embodying the work.
Mm.
And I take 100% responsibility for all of it. And I delegate and I praise and I lead and I'm accountable. And then all of a sudden it just starts to form because the best idea wins. But I gave it through to something that I knew would elevate them.
Mm.
And that's part of ourselves as leaders of going, what do they need from us? And what kind of word would actually open them or close them?
Amazing. First principle is the energies themselves, the
Correct.
energies, the
Yeah.
how we be in it, that when we practice our own practice and from our own practice with love and expansiveness and wideness of heart and intentionality, listen and stay present to the truth of the moment, then we can apply these principles everywhere and anywhere.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so what a perfectly beautiful response, because it's going to apply the same in everywhere. There, those two places and everywhere else. If we
Well,
keep,
and then it's like we have a responsibility for people like you and I to not get triggered.
yeah,
I have agility. And you know what? I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm just going to call it something else because they actually really do need this.
yeah,
And I have the flexibility and power to be able to just change my word and still
yeah.
give and still be of service.
When we can stay connected to both our own hearts and the need in the other, then we can be in service of what's needed. How do I serve love? Um, and then bring the entrainments and the alignment with the language for
Correct.
what's needed in that moment. And
And
so,
asking the how and asking the how.
right,
So it's like, I know that I love you,
yeah,
but how I love you is this one way. And like my
right,
love language is touch. And you're like, I don't like touch. I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn my how to be words of encouragement.
yeah.
So I'm going to have the agility to shift. So tell me how you like to be loved.
Hmm. I mean, I think the thing that I'm really being with right now is how beautifully central and essential these principles that we both see in and bring to
Mm.
so many other worlds and venues and approaches, that when it comes right down to it, it's so simple in some ways. It's breath, it's presence, it's caring, it's translating and building bridges.
Well, it's like Miles Davis said, it's like it takes a long time to sound like yourself.
Yeah,
So it's like we had to do the 10,000 hours or whatever that is to go like, oh, well, it's just really simple. And I'm like, well, it's not. It's because we're mastering really complicated things to make it simple, but this takes years of training and
yeah,
experiencing and fucking up and making mistakes. And I mean, man, I have fucked up so many times. But they just keep coming back to like, is Brishnikov, how many pliés do you think he did? How many
yeah.
scales did Miles play? you just keep coming back to these simple things to then there's like what my other one I love is learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist.
Ooh, you got the quotes. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I love that you recognize that when I say it's simple, I don't mean it's easy. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that the essence of what we're talking about, it, is so deep that it's so true that it's simple, but it's
Anthony
so,
Bourdain said that the best food should never have more than four ingredients. But
oh,
how
interesting.
long does it take to be a master chef to make the most exquisite pasta or ice cream or with only four ingredients? So it's actually really simple, but to make it simple and that the refinement of that
The
takes
mastery.
decades, takes decades.
Hmm, yeah.
Do you miss the your artistic world? Do you miss being an actress? Do you miss that now that you've
Mm.
evolved? And that's great, you've evolved, but there's still a part of you that's just like,
Oh, I really miss it. And if I had a regret, it would be that I fully left it to raise my kids. And,
mm,
I thought about going back to it, but it's hard to go back to it after so many years. But I had a really beautiful career. I loved my career. I worked a lot in Toronto, and then I moved to LA, and I worked some in LA, and I did a lot of different things. I did multiple series regular roles and films and movies of the week. And I was really fortunate. I had a really great run. But when I left it at the time, my racial ambiguity was a bit of a problem. I worked in spite of it, but it was challenging, and now I know it's not. So I kind of wish I'd stuck around to see that change and to be part of
mm,
that change. Also, there weren't as many great women's roles at that time. And so a lot of the aspects of the business have changed as as our cultural attitudes have broadened. And I miss, the truth is I love auditioning. Auditioning is one of my favorite things. But at the time, I thought acting is my dojo because I was already doing personal development stuff. I started that when I was 19, and I saw acting as being the dojo, the place to be. Can I always come back to the center of
mm.
who I am, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the results of the audition, regardless of whether I got the part or didn't get the part? So I saw it really as a personal practice for personal growth. And so in some ways, I don't have to miss it because I've just carried that into other realms, and I've taken parts of my experience as an actor, in terms of working, but also in training, and I brought that into other places. But the answer to your question is, yeah, I do miss it. Yeah.
I love that. I remember a friend of mine said that when he first found the theater, he's like, I've never identified with church or going to church. And he went to the theater and he's like, oh my God, this is my church.
Yeah.
This is my home.
Yeah.
And I will
Totally.
always remember that moment in London and studying there and walking into this theater with my voice teacher, my voice coach, Stuart Pierce. And I was like, I'm home.
Yeah. There's something about not just doing a production, for sure doing a
Mm,
production, but also in being in training and being in theater school is one of the most amazing experiences
mhm,
of community possible when you're surrounded by other people who are looking to expand their range and understand themselves more deeply. And
mm.
you know this, but actors are so misunderstood. When people think that actors are whatever the stories they make up about actors, actors are some of the most intelligent,
Yep.
deep, profound, exploratory, open-minded people possible because that's our craft. And so that's a
Well,
tribe I still feel part of, even though I'm not.
I know I'm sure we're probably coming to a close, but like one of the things that people come to me all the time and say, "Oh, my kid wants to go to school for acting. He needs to have something to back, or she needs to have something to fall back on." And I said, "No, they don't. Everyone I went to acting school with, whether they're actors or not, became immensely successful at other things because it gave them public speaking and understanding themselves, and whether they became lawyers or politicians or other things, that acting training just taught them how to be themselves.
Yeah.
So like they're the reason why I'm able to be a pretty high level, whether it's coach or embodiment person, is because of my MFA from one of the best acting schools. It made me more of an embodiment coach. It's completely connected. So it's
Yeah.
so funny how isolated people look at acting training, And I don't know any actors that I went to acting training with, and they're like, oh, I guess I'm just going to wait tables the rest of my life. That never happened.
Right.
They all moved on to doing extraordinary things
Oh, that's such a great
because
point.
they
Because
because
they
they
started,
started out as being fully themselves. This is who
right.
I. This is as Joseph Campbell said, following my bliss. And you keep following your bliss, and what you're gonna ultimately become who you're supposed to be. And
Yeah.
what a better way than being trained as an actor to be fully yourself.
I'm going to add to that that they not only went through that training to become fully themselves, but they started out as people who were hungry to know more and who were hungry to have that experience
Yeah,
and hungry to
absolutely.
deepen in. So
Yeah.
they began as people that craved life and connection and understanding and depth, and then they went further into it. So of course they're going to be people who are going to be seekers. I think actors are seekers. We totally did geek out, and I have no idea how much any of this is going to be relevant to who. And there are through lines of generalized ideas here, but if we had to kind of
No, I would
yeah.
disagree with you. I'm going to push back on this. I
Okay.
think that what has brought me success
Yeah.
is that my feet are in two worlds, which is the creative artistic world and the consciousness world. And we're meant to have conversations that excite people
Hmm.
about talking about things that they might not have been introduced to.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So this is I think these conversations are really important about bridging that we're meant to geek out and go, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Rather
yeah.
than, oh, you're saying the shit I already know.
No, I love that reframe. That's a great reframe. Yeah.
That's just because I've had to go like, somewhere like, how do you always get these people to come to your courses? And I'm like, because I'm always trying to be around people that aren't like me
Yes.
or introduce people that would seem opposite, but they're not. And that to me is where the greatest creatives come in, is that they work with an opposite. I love people that I disagree with.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love them.
I love how you're circling back to something you said earlier and represencing that thing, just like the long form improv does.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that book on Abraham Lincoln, The Team of Rivals, when one of the greatest presidents of all time, and his cabinet was filled with people that were his rivals that didn't get along with him. Instead
Mhm.
of cronies, he wanted people to
Yeah.
be opposite. So it's like having this conversation and putting this out there of us geeking out, like, be confused.
Yeah.
Don't agree with us.
Uh-huh.
Great.
Have no idea what we're
Great.
talking about. What does that
Yes.
expand? Yes.
Yes. Those are the
What
things
unconscious?
I want to listen to. Wait, what the fuck are they talking about? I want to look that up. As opposed to, yeah, Lisa and Jamie are talking about polarity and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I want this conversation to be out with the people who don't get it and go, but I trust Lisa and I trust Jamie. And wow, they're making this in a way. And I think that's more exciting, personally.
I love that. You're exactly right. And your name, and I love your naming it, because the truth is that that's how I have lived my life. I can't really do anything else except bring in all the things that sort of have some relatedness, but then they're a completely different expanded version of it. Kind of like a chaotic world where it seems like everything's unrelated, but the truth is, if you look further, there's some overlapped meaning that's shared.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way that I live my life. That's what I'm attracted to in the world and in my
Well, and
experience.
also you were like, whether it was the racially ambiguous, I think were your words. You decided to do that, and I got a job anyway. And now that it might be more open, you're like, I'm probably not going to go back. It's like you did it when it was hard,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
succeeded. Like that's
Yeah.
fucking awesome. You were a trailblazer, and now you're trailblazing this, and it's like, I don't know. I just think that's really inspiring. Like that's like you're never gonna. I think we're not meant to make it easy for people.
Hmm. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That's a really gift in the conversation for me, just to presence that and to
Yeah,
remind me of that, because sometimes I can forget that. So I'm going to say that I love that you brought that into the conversation as, a piece of deepening and healing and reminding. So thank you.
I see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a real gift of a conversation. I'm so, so happy we did it this way.
Me too. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
put links in the show notes of all the things that you're doing, some of the things we've already talked about, but also the things that you have coming up. But, for a moment, just share what you are doing and how people might recognize themselves as someone who could work with you and how they might find you
Okay.
more.
I mean, thank you. And this has been a beautiful conversation. If you are creatively stuck and you're trying to find your purpose, that's what I do, especially, and I help men. I call it the creative masculine. So I help men do men's work, but ultimately create something by the end. I'm producing a short film and I'm producing a feature right now with some really exciting people. I have an e-course that I've worked on for 3 years called The Empowered Voice. That will be 16 of these three circles of energy coming out. I'm doing a 3-day workshop in Ojai as the launch for that. And then, yeah, those are the two projects right now. The short film called Vice Story, and then my feature Synthetic, and then I have this voice course that's going to be coming out, which I'm really excited about. So
Is there a point of
exciting.
contact at your website for people to
Yeah,
go to?
just email. Yeah, it's just been revamped, jamiewollrab.com. And if you want to follow Jamie Wollrab Studios on Instagram, and I do a free consultation to anyone who wants to work with me. But yeah, there's some really, really big stuff on the horizon I'm very excited about. So yeah.
Beautiful. I want to just recognize and appreciate your openness and your brilliant mind that brings so many pieces together, and the level of articulateness. And I'm so impressed with all the quotes that you have and how you're such a powerful storyteller for the purpose of making meaning. And
Mm.
that's just beautiful and just brings so much richness and aliveness to the conversation. And so I really appreciate you. Thank you. If there's anything in today's episode or any other episode you've seen that you found valuable or interesting or important in any way, if you could share it with a friend. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, the like, the notification button, so you'll always be notified when I publish new content, and so you can help me to grow the channel. In the meantime, please do check out this video or this playlist where I think you'll find even more interesting information. Thanks again for being here. See you next time.